Chapter 22 of The Return of Dr. Fu-Manchu. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Elaine Tweddle. The Return of Dr. Fu-Manchu by Sax Rohmer. Chapter 22 The Mulatto. The room in which Van Roon received us was roughly of the shape of an old-fashioned keyhole. One end of it occupied the base of the tower, upon which the remainder had evidently been built. In many respects it was a singular room, but the feature which caused me the greatest amazement was this: it had no windows. In the deep alcove formed by the tower sat Van Roon at a littered table, upon which stood an oil reading lamp, green shaded, of the Victoria pattern, to furnish the entire illumination of the apartment. That bookshelves lined the rectangular portion of this strange study I divined, although that end of the place was dark as a catacomb. The walls were wood paneled and the ceiling was oak beamed. A small bookshelf and tumble-down cabinet stood upon either side of the table, and the celebrated American author and traveler lay propped up in a long split-cane chair. He wore smoked glasses and had a clean-shaven, olive face, with a profusion of jet-black hair. He was garbed in a dirty red dressing-gown, and a perfect fog of cigar smoke hung in the room. He did not rise to greet us, but merely extended his right hand, between two fingers whereof he held Smith's card. "You will excuse the seeming discourtesy of an invalid, gentlemen," he said, "but I am suffering from an undue temerity of the interior of China." He waved his hand vaguely, and I saw that two rough deal chairs stood near the table. Smith and I seated ourselves, and my friend, leaning his elbow upon the table, looked fixedly at the face of the man whom we had come from London to visit. Although comparatively unfamiliar to the British public, the name of Van Roon was well known in American literary circles, for he enjoyed in the United States a reputation somewhat similar to that which had rendered the name of our mutual friend, Sir Lionel Barton, a household word in England. It was Van Roon who, following the footsteps of Madame Blavatsky, had sought out the haunts of the fabled Mahatmas in the Himalayas, and Van Roon who had essayed to explore the fever swamps of Yucatan in quest of the secret of lost Atlantis. Lastly, it was Van Roon who, in an overland car specially built for him by a celebrated American firm, had undertaken the journey across China. I studied the olive face with curiosity. Its natural impassivity was so greatly increased by the presence of the colored spectacles that my study was as profitless as if I had scrutinized the face of a carven Buddha. The mulatto had withdrawn, and in an atmosphere of gloom and tobacco smoke, Smith and I sat staring, perhaps rather rudely, at the object of our visit to the West Country. "Mr. Van Roon," began my friend abruptly, "you will no doubt have seen this paragraph. It appeared in this morning's Daily Telegraph." He stood up, and taking out the cutting from his notebook, placed it on the table. "I have seen this, yes," said Van Roon, revealing a row of even white teeth in a rapid smile. "Is it to this paragraph that I owe the pleasure of seeing you here?" "The paragraph appeared in this morning's issue," replied Smith. "An hour from the time of seeing it, my friend Dr. Petrie and I were entrained for Bridgewater." "Your visit delights me, gentlemen, and I should be ungrateful to question its cause, but frankly I am at a loss to understand why you should have honored me thus. I am a poor host, God knows, for what with my tortured limb, a legacy from the Chinese devils whose secrets I surprised, and my semi-blindness, due to the same cause, I am but sorry company." Nayland Smith held up his right hand deprecatingly. Van Roon tendered a box of cigars and clapped his hands, whereupon the mulatto entered. "I can see you have a story to tell me, Mr. Smith," he said. "Therefore I suggest whisky and soda, or you might prefer tea, as it's nearly tea time?" Smith and I chose the former refreshment, and the soft-footed half-breed having departed upon his errand, my companion, leaning forward earnestly across the littered table, outlined for Van Roon the story of Dr. Fu-Manchu, the great and malign being whose mission in England at that moment was none other than the stoppage of just such information as our host was preparing to give to the world. "There is a giant conspiracy, Mr. Van Roon," he said, "which had its birth in this very province of Ho Nan, from which you were so fortunate to escape alive. Whatever its scope or limitations, a great secret society is established among the yellow races. It means that China, which has slumbered for so many generations, now stirs in that age-long sleep. I need not tell you how much more it means, this seething in the pot. In a word, interrupted Van Roon, pushing Smith's glass across the table. "You would say that your life is not worth that," replied Smith, snapping his fingers before the other's face. A very impressive silence fell. I watched Van Roon curiously as he sat propped up amongst his cushions, his smooth face ghastly in the green light from the lamp shade. He held the stump of a cigar between his teeth, but apparently unnoticed by him, it had long since gone out. Smith, out of the shadows, was watching him too. Then "Your information is very disturbing," said the American. "I am more disposed to credit your statement because I am all too painfully aware of the existence of such a group as you mention in China, but that they had an agent here in England is something I had never conjectured. In seeking out this solitary residence I have unwittingly done much to assist their designs. But, my dear Mr. Smith, I am very remiss. Of course you will remain tonight, and I trust for some days to come?" Smith glanced rapidly across at me, and then turned again to our host. "It seems like forcing our company upon you," he said, "but in your own interests I think it will be best to do as you are good enough to suggest. I hope and believe that our arrival here has not been noticed by the enemy. Therefore it will be well if we remain concealed as much as possible for the present until we have settled upon some plan." "Hagar shall go to the station for your baggage," said the American rapidly, and clapped his hands, his usual signal to the mulatto. Whilst the latter was receiving his orders, I noticed Nayland Smith watching him closely, and when he had departed "How long has that man been in your service?" snapped my friend. Van Roon peered blindly through his smoked glasses. "For some years," he replied. "He was with me in India and in China." "Where did you engage him?" "Actually in St. Kitts." Muttered Smith, and automatically he took out and began to fill his pipe. "I can offer you no company but my own, gentlemen," continued Van Roon, "but unless it interferes with your plans, you may find the surrounding district of interest and worthy of inspection between now and dinner time. By the way, I think I can promise you a quite satisfactory meal, for Hagar is a model chef." "A walk would be enjoyable," said Smith, "but dangerous." "Ah, perhaps you are right. Evidently you apprehend some attempt upon me?" "At any moment." "To one in my crippled condition, an alarming outlook. However, I place myself unreservedly in your hands. But really, you must not leave this interesting district before you have made the acquaintance of some of its historical spots. To me, stooped as I am in what I may term the lore of the odd, it is a veritable wonderland, almost as interesting in its way as the caves and jungles of Hindustan depicted by Madame Blavatsky." His high pitched voice, and a certain labored intonation, not quite so characteristically American as was his accent, rose even higher. He spoke with the fire of the enthusiast. "When I learned that Cragmire Tower was vacant," he continued, "I leaped at the chance. Excuse the metaphor from a lame man. This is a ghost hunter's paradise. The tower itself is of unknown origin, though probably Phoenician, and the house traditionally sheltered Dr. Macleod, the necromancer, after his flight from the persecution of James of Scotland. Then, to add to its interest, it borders on Sedgemoor, the scene of the bloody battle during the Monmouth Rising, whereat 1,000 were slain in the field. It is a local legend that the unhappy Duke and his staff may be seen on stormy nights crossing the path which skirts the mire after which this building is named, with flaming torches held aloft." "Merely marsh lights, I take it?" interjected Smith, gripping his pipe hard between his teeth. "Your practical mind naturally seeks a practical explanation," smiled Van Roon, "but I myself have other theories. Then, in addition to the charms of Sedgemoor, haunted Sedgemoor, on a fine day it is quite possible to see the ruins of Glastonbury Abbey from here, and Glastonbury Abbey, as you may know, is closely bound up with the history of alchemy. It was in the ruins of Glastonbury Abbey that the adept Kelly, companion of Dr. Dee, discovered, in the reign of Elizabeth, the famous caskets of St. Dunstan, containing 2 tinctures..." So he ran on, enumerating the odd charms of his residence, charms which, for my part, I did not find appealing. Finally, "We cannot presume further upon your kindness," said Nayland Smith, standing up. "No doubt we can amuse ourselves in the neighborhood of the house until the return of your servant?" "Look upon Cragmire Tower as your own, gentlemen," cried Van Roon. "Most of the rooms are unfurnished, and the garden is a wilderness, but the structure of the brickwork in the tower may interest you archaeologically, and the view across the moor is at least as fine as any in the neighborhood." So, with his brilliant smile and a gesture of one thin, yellow hand, the crippled traveler made us free of his odd dwelling. As I passed out from the room close at Smith's heels, I glanced back, I cannot say why. Van Roon was already bending over his